As you can see here, I've added some interior profiles, some frames, and I've added a little instrument panel here. And this is where things really start becoming interesting, because we'd like to add some instruments to this panel. Now, on most aircraft, you would just find yourself a drawing or a picture of the cockpit and use that. However, for this aircraft, documentation is severely lacking. There are no pictures of cockpits that I know of. The only picture that I have is this. If we do our best, we can see here the window. We can see it is an aluminium sheet type of instrument panel. That's basically all we have. I collected some images of aircraft cockpits from the same era. And here you can see a 3-engined F7. This aircraft has another layout. This is a more modern variant of the Southern Cross 7B. Here another photograph of a tri-motor and a cockpit photo from an earlier single engine model. What we can see here are many instruments, many French instruments, contrôleur de vol, this is oil inlet, oil outlet, and this is because the aircraft in this time were mostly built and then the cockpit was an afterthought. They looked at the instruments they had on the shelf, mostly World War I remnants, and they would just stick that in. Now, I think the closest thing we can find is an aircraft that was built in the same factory, in the same time. It had the same purpose as a short-range utility aircraft, used the same wing, the same engine. That is the Fokker Super Universal. And I've gathered some pictures here. These are the old pictures. They're a bit hard to read. You can not see what this is. This is from a wreck. And this is from the reconstruction, where you can actually, if you look carefully, look like this is fuel pressure, and we can make out the location and the purpose of the various instruments. Obviously the tubes that you see here, we wouldn't have this because our aircraft is of a different construction. And with this in mind, let's draw our own instrument panel. Okay, now we have an instrument panel, and with these holes we have the correct location and scale of the instruments. Now let's start building the airspeed indicator. Okay, back in Blender, if we go to UV editing and I select the instrument panel, this takes quite a significant part of our interior texture. And the reason is that we are going to be looking at this most of the time, and therefore also the flight instruments, we want to be able to zoom in on them and still have high resolution textures. So for that reason, we're going to make a new collection called flight instruments. Okay, let's start. Add mesh cylinder. Rotate 90x. Put it in the middle. Scale it up. Grab Y. Put it back a little bit. Yeah, that looks like a good location for an airspeed indicator. Before we continue, let's build the collection so we can export this. Select the object, add a new material, give it a color just to get started. Now go to scene properties, make flight instruments an active root collection, give it a name. So this is going to be objects B for flight instruments. Okay. If we export objects, we go to plane maker, standard objects, add objects. It should be here. B for flight instruments objects. Open. Make sure the numbers are all the same. Let's see. I'm going to do high res. And also we're not going to do internal cockpit or external cockpit. we'll leave that for now, but the lighting is going to be inside, shadow mode is going to be interior, no prefill. That should be it. File, save, to explain, developer, reload current aircraft and art. Okay, we have an instrument, but we just destroyed the interior, and that's because we just deselected everything. So let's load that again. Okay, something's there. Let's build a texture. Shading, add texture, image texture. Let's make it a 4K texture. Okay, and let's add the color to the base color. Oh yeah, all these faces, we can remove that. Objects, shade auto smooth. Every angle that's less than 30 degrees will now be round. That's better. Edit mode, U, project from view. We'll also select this, smart UV. So what have we done? We go to UV editing. Here we're going to select our new texture, V for flight instruments. This is going to be the face of the instrument, and this is going to be the housing of the instrument. Maybe put it in a little corner where we can forget about it. This is going to be the face of our instruments. Let's do texture paint. Oh, look at that. Now, in theory, we could hand paint this 0, 25, 50. But obviously this is not very pretty. So we're not going to do that. Instead, we're going to save this texture, save as, and for now we'll call it flight instruments PNG. Obviously here it's much easier to make something nice. It's not great, but we'll have to do with it. So print screen, and now I'm going to paste. I'll just do what it takes to get it approximately in the correct position. Now what really helps as well, if we just take guidelines and select the middle. And now we can hand draw a new texture on top of this. So layer, new layer. It's going to say airspeed in caps lock. It's going to be a little bit larger maybe. Add a proper circle. Make this close to black. Duplicate layer. This will be 80. Okay, we have sort of an airspeed indicator, and if you have a very nice crisp picture, this might be good enough. I would like to take this a step further and make an actual 3D instrument. We're going to do this by tracing the numbers and make our own lines and stuff like that. Shift S, cursor to selected. Now let's add mesh plane, scale it down, rotate 90x. So if we extend this, grab Z, go up, and now scale X and make it narrow. Let's see what's the correct width, and this one, grab Z and bring it up, put the mark there, duplicate, enter, rotate, and the next, duplicate, enter, rotate to the next. Now we have all kind of marks, but they're still 2D objects. So actually what I'm going to do now is extrude them, Y, and make them 3D objects. And now we can make them pretty. Add bevel, objects, auto shade smooth. That's better. Now we need to add an indicator needle. We begin by adding a cylinder that will become the shaft. Now add an indicator needle to the shaft. Under counterweight, add material and texture. Extrude to make it a 3D object. Make it pretty with a bevel modifier and shade smooth. Now we need to either parent all the objects to the shaft or join them together and add the animation. Find the data ref in the data ref tool. We can copy and paste this into Blender. Insert the keyframe. And with the arrow keys we move to another frame, rotate the object and insert a new keyframe. And add a value and make sure to set the interpolation mode to linear. For most airspeed indicators this should be sufficient, however ours is in miles per hour and the scale is non-linear, so we need to calibrate the instrument at every 5 to 10 knots or so and convert the knots to miles per hour. Okay, 3D objects look pretty. If you have a look at the amount of vertices, they're quite a lot. And now if you're concerned about the performance of your aircraft, you don't want all these unnecessary vertices because all of these little dots will slow your simulator down. What you can do is use these objects to texture paint. We see here the texture that we're using now. Let's select everything except for the needle. Tab to go into edit mode, A to select all, and then project from view. Let's put this in the middle. Now if we select everything that's supposed to be white, texture paint, and you can see a little flag, so we paint the numbers and we do the miles per hour mark. Everything that we painted onto the texture, we can now remove these 3D objects. Hide the airspeed, hide the numbers, hide the marks, and now you see we have the same instrument except there's only a few vertices, so this is a lot more performance friendly. But if you zoom in, you can see you lose a little bit of the quality there. From a distance this is okay, so it's up to you. Right, let's add a glass to our instruments. Let's take this little line, press P, selection. Now we made a new object which we're going to call ASI gauge glass and parent that to the case. We have an object. If we just fill this in, that's where we're going to have a glass, but we cannot make it into the flight instruments object. We have to make a new scene collection. New collection, and let's call this couches glass. And we're going to move this ASE gauge glass to the new collection. Let's make that a root collection. Couch glass. We'll select the textures later, but important is that we select blend glass. Let's do the whole thing, make a material, new material, couch glass, UV, project from view, about there, just to keep it consistent with the other textures. Shading, add, texture, image texture, new, before couch glass, connect to base color. Let's do texture paint, nice and blue. It's not working because tab to go into edit mode. Let's have a look here at face orientation. It's just the wrong way around, so mesh, normals, flip, back to texture paint. There we go. Can make it nice and blue like glass. Image, save as, P4 gauge glass PNG, export object, go to plane maker, standard, objects, add, B4 gauge glass objects, make sure the numbers are all the same. Lighting, it's going to be glass inside, and that's the only thing. File, save, reload aircraft and art. We don't have the texture selected yet, so go back to Blender. Let's look here at gauge glass. Default texture is going to be B4 gauge glass PNG. Try that again. And now it's at least the correct color, but it's still fully opaque, so we need to make this transparent. And therefore we have to open this texture in a photo editing program and make it transparent. Let's do 15%. Reload current aircraft and art. So now I have a transparent piece of glass over the airspeed indicator. That's good for a first one. Let's build some more. We now have 3 instruments, and as you can see, I've used 3 different techniques for these various instruments, where the airspeed indicator is a fully 3D instrument, the tachometer is a hand-drawn texture, and the altimeter is a cleaned up photo texture. The altimeter instrument is not finished yet. We need a knob to be able to adjust the air pressure setting, and that requires a manipulator, and we're going to do this in the next video. Stay tuned.